Staring. Why do we do it? It is said that the reason behind staring is that our brains, whether consciously or not, desire more time to finish processing what our eyes are looking at. Originally developed by BioWare, published by Interplay Entertainment, and brought into the modern age by Beamdog in 2012, Baldurs Gate was a game my brain needed a bit more time to stare at. When I first started the game, I was excited about the adventure that I was going to go on. I was instantly charmed as I entered my first interior building and was greeted by a would-be assassin, my first taste of combat. For around a minute, I watched as my character swung fruitlessly at his enemy, occasionally noticing my health go down. A few lucky dice roll later, and the assassin was dead, and I was back on my way to adventure. To be honest, I thought my first murder would have had more of an effect on my character, considering they've lived in the walled, peaceful scholar community of Candlekeep their entire lives. But that's a story for later. Eventually, I was out in the wilderness, exploring the fog of war and killing whatever came my way. It was at this point, though, that I was wondering if this was really the game for me. I knew going in that to experience the fullness of the franchise, I'd have to start at the beginning, but the commitment started to loom too great. Maybe I should go back to Pathfinder. No, that would take too long. Find a shorter game? No, that's a coward's way out. No. I was going to stick with Baldurs Gate. This is my second Infinity Engine game that I have played, the first being Planescape Torment at the end of 2022. I was 5 years old when this game originally came out, so I didn't really catch the wave of CRPG fun that was so booming in the late 90s. I did play a bit of Diablo 2, but that came later and was more popular in my schoolyard because of how easy it was to play together, something which I've heard Baldurs Gate struggled with. My first introduction to BioWare games was with 2003's Knights of the Old Republic. I'd also played some Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy X, but for the most part as a young'un my gaming was confined to console, meaning that the past 6 months have been quite interesting, exploring a bit of history that I was born too late for. Anyway, I pressed onwards with Baldurs Gate, eventually reaching the city in Chapter 5. But this must have been around the same time that Final Fantasy XVI came out, because I had dropped right off playing Baldurs Gate. It's not that the game wasn't fun, but I'd just hit another point where I wasn't sure if it was the game for me, and the flashy button mashing of FF16 was just what the doctor ordered. Except it was more of a band-aid than a cure. Defeated and without a clear idea of what game I was going to review this month, I decided to push through my middling feelings on Baldurs Gate. At least I would have finished the game, giving myself the self-assuredness that I'd need to give an informed opinion on it. To my surprise, I ended up beating the game that very same afternoon. From Chapter 5 to Chapter 8, it all went in a blur. I was rushing, but at some point, and without noticing, I was having fun. So when the credits finally rolled, well, I felt I wasn't done staring. I immediately created a new character, this time with the intention of savouring the game, exploring the fog of war, and trying to do things as different as possible from my first run. This is becoming one of my longest intros ever, and so far one could perceive it as rambling. But this is an enthusiasm that I'm very keen to share. Something I've noticed about playing old games for review is that, well, no one I know has the same level of enthusiasm I do at the same time as I do. So, without further ado. Hello everyone, my name is Stone Skeleton, and this is my review of Baldurs Gate Enhanced Edition. Baldurs Gate is a pretty solid package presentation-wise. The environments range from colourful to drab and staying mostly grounded in tone. Your characters move around the pre-rendered environments as a little doll people. If you're a real graphics hound, this is going to be a pretty bitter game to swallow. I'll go a bit more into it later, but the more old games I play, the more I start to feel that games haven't become any more complex or fun, they just have more quality of life features. At first, combat can be pretty unreadable and it's a bit of a mess, but eventually you'll get a feel for it, learning what spell effects do what, which monster is which, etc. I don't know, I feel like it may be a cop-out saying, quote unquote, it's fine, you'll just have to get used to it, but it's literally what I did, so it's the only advice I can give. The ambient sound was fantastic in Planescape, and the same can be said here. Is this an Infinity Engine thing? I'm not sure. Anyway, the music errs on the side of exaggeratedly bombastic, playing war music at inappropriate times, but I never had any problem with it. There's quite a few catchy tunes in there. Combat sounds also add weight to the gameplay. Meaty slashes and loud clanks add a visceral feeling to the papier-mâché melees, and it's very funny hearing wizards all talk in the same voice to cast spells. Upon first playing the game, I found the voice acting pretty annoying. There's some good stuff in it, but the character barks were insanely obnoxious, and I'm looking at you, Zara. After a while, like a lot of things I'm finding in older games, I got used to it and even came to enjoy it. After doing some Googling, I noticed that the game actually had a lot of voice talent behind it. I guess the obnoxious part could come from them all doing their best at the table voices. Maybe they didn't get many lines to record and just had to make as big of an impact as possible, which, if the case, mission accomplished. The gameplay of Baldur's Gate is something that I've been affectionately thinking of as adventure RTS. Throughout the game, you will take control of up to 6 units at once. You will drag boxes to select them, click on where you want them to move and attack, and travel through these RTS-style maps, uncovering what is beyond the fog of war. Where it gets interesting and separates itself from an RTS is the fact that the game is, of course, an RPG. When you're out exploring, whacking a few gabagools and looting their treasure, it isn't for extra score at the end screen. It's yours to keep and to do what you will with. Your quote-unquote units, or as we call them at the table, party members, gather experience and grow stronger with each fight. I know I'm just describing in general terms what an RPG is, but hey, this Infinity Engine shit is kinda new to me, and I'm still getting over just how fun it is. The more you adventure, the stronger your party will become. Genius, right? It's so simple, but in Baldur's Gate you really do start from square one, and levels do not come quickly. You can get your ass kicked pretty easily in the beginning, and being level 1, you probably don't have that many options to do something about it. Of course, this depends on what kind of character you created to start out with. In some of the research I did before playing the game, I had heard that ranged characters were pretty OP. In an attempt to give me an easier time of the game, I decided to make my character an archer. Next, you get the fun part of rolling for stats. The game will roll 5 20-sided die to determine your stats, the max total of the stats being available being 100. On my first playthrough, I didn't quite understand just how important stats were in 2nd edition D&D. I'd already rolled a few times and thought that 79 is a fine overall score. This was the birth of my first character that I beat the game with, Leon S. Kennedy. After you've made your character, you are set loose upon the opening of the game. You are a young adult child which never left these safe walls of Candlekeep, and today is the day your adopted father Gorion has declared you get the fuck out of there. You are given some time to prepare yourself in Candlekeep before you leave, and this serves as your tutorial. You'll go around chatting with townsfolk, completing a few chores, and getting some lessons from your nearest rogue tutor. The basics of exploration in Baldur's Gate revolve mostly around interacting with NPCs and the world itself. Conversing with NPCs is simple, the same pre-Mass Effect BioWare that we've all used to. You'll approach an NPC, hear what they've got to say, and then select one of a couple of responses to progress the conversation. You probably know the drill. Choosing different options can at times result in mechanical changes, such as more experience, gold, items, making the quest easier, or on the flip side of the coin, doing the opposite of those things. The other side of exploration is found in the world. By holding or toggling the inspect button, you are able to see more information around your character, namely character names and openable containers in the world. Containers will often be locked and or trapped, so you'll need to keep a thief in your party to open most of them. From my experience, all the locked chests will ever contain is simply more treasure, which the game has plenty of as it is. This is just to say that you don't have to eat every bowl of rigatone, open every chest that you go by, as you'll end up loaded no matter what. You can also use your thief to disarm traps and pickpocket NPCs in the world. This can lead to some pretty cool interactions with just stealing quest items outright. Also, you are able to charm NPCs, and in some cases, charmed enemies will give different dialogue, giving further insight into what they're really thinking. For the game's combat, I will refer to what I said earlier, that this is an RTS-RPG. Every character in combat gets one action per round, a round that lasts 6 seconds. For example, I have a fighter character. I select them and tell them to attack an enemy. Depending on their equipment and their stats, they can attack so many times in a single round. For this example, let's just say 1. My little doll fighter would go and attack the enemy once in this 6-second interval, putting his next attack on a cooldown until the next round. This rule applies for all characters and is the basis for how combat works in Baldur's Gate. Controlling one character isn't so bad, but it can get complicated quickly when controlling a full party with a varied set of abilities. The game employs a real-time with pause system, meaning that at any point you can pause the action and assess your situation. Orders given while paused will play out the next time the characters have an action. To help give you spacebar a rest, you can also set up auto pauses, which is something I remember from Knights of the Old Republic. For example, you can set the game to pause when your party sees an enemy or a trap, a party member gets wounded, stuff like that. To further give you a hand in the heat of combat, the game comes loaded with a bunch of pre-made AI settings, which gives you more control over your party if you choose to play with the AI on. In my experience, if you build your party smartly and aren't rushing through, you can get away with the AI doing a large portion of your fighting. But there's always going to be times where you'll want to pause and course correct the action. You get to be pretty creative with combat, with magic playing a large role here. There are heaps and loads of spells from multiple classes of magic. Buffs and crowd control are important to keep track of. I didn't really use too much magic on my first playthrough. It was all a bit much. Once you get your footing though, it is satisfying trading the crutch of my ranged combat characters for my new understanding of the magic system. In my Planescape review, I referred to it as a football simulator, and the same is true here, but in a different way. When I played Planescape, I had no idea how to manage the combat, and basically just tried to run through tough encounters, cutting the enemies around and then sweeping my party through any optional combat encounter. Here though, I know that killing monsters were going to make up a large part of the experience I would get, so I'd have to learn to stand my ground when it came to the big scary wolves. Here it felt like I was this team of adventurers' coach, and it was my job to call the plays that led them to the Super Bowl. Well, that was more of my second playthrough. My first playthrough, I was just doing whatever I could to survive and finish the game. This brings me to the game's pacing issues, that cause both a strength and a weakness. After leaving Candlekeep in the game's opening hour or so, you are given some direction on where to go next, but you're under no obligation to follow these directions. While the critical path is well signposted, that being that you go to the Friendly Arms Inn to the north, but the wilderness is vast and filling in that fog of war can be pretty alluring. The maps you'll be exploring are gargantuan in size and for the most part pretty empty. Filling in that fog of war, you will come across tons of quests, caves, monsters, but a lot of the time there isn't that much interesting going on. In Baldur's Gate, there is just so much adventure for adventure's sake, which, at least for my first playthrough, did not appeal to me. Depending on how many of these optional side quests you want to do, it'll probably be the determining factor on how well the candle of Baldur's Gate burns for you. For my first playthrough, I barely did any side quests because I didn't really understand what was going on, but I was surviving. When I got to Baldur's Gate itself, I was bombarded by quest after quest without knowing which ones I needed to do to finish the game. By the end of it, I was level 6. Knowing what I know now, that is pretty low. I probably should have done some more treasure hunting and leveling up my team, but I made it by the skin of my teeth. At no point did I ever need to refer to a guide either, which I thought was really cool, though nothing in the game, either the level or encounter design, really demands much thought from the player. When I saw the credits, I was overtaken by a feeling that I've had before. This feeling was one of several times that I've gone ice skating. You'd go for an hour or two session, starting out pretty terribly and just wanting to bail. But after a while, you could get the hang of it. Soon you're steadily moving about the ice and feeling confident about the progress you've made in the time. But now your time is up, and it is time to go home. I don't know why I was ice skating in the first place, and I don't know when I'll ever do it again. But I have been multiple times, and the time in between visits is always enough to reset my progress with it back to zero. Baldur's Gate was like the ice rink, and the credits were telling me to go home, just as I had gotten the hang of it. No, I do not accept, I shouted. I did not want to go home. I wanted to play again. For the first time since my Resident Evil HD review, I wanted to replay a game I was reviewing. Not out of any obligation, I had already seen the credits, but because I wanted to understand this fascinating game more completely. And so I did. This time as Tony Soprano, the neutral evil dwarven cleric of Talos. I spent, and I shit you not, about 45 minutes rolling for stats after talking with a friend who'd played the game many times, telling me I wanted at least a 90. In hindsight, this probably wasn't that important, considering I had already finished the game with an underleveled character with crap starting stats, but I figure it's worth it for my journey to Baldur's Gate 2. This time, I put a lot more effort into finding quests and filling in my map. I still wasn't using a guide, so I imagine I missed a lot of content, but that's okay. I say this because that's what a lot of the content is. Just okay. It's good, solid adventure stuff that ranges from super generic to subversion of the super generic. It's an all-you-can-eat buffet of adventure. You probably won't have the appetite to eat every dish on your first few playthroughs, but at least you know there could still be a few surprises waiting for you next time you go in. A special mention to Durlag's Tower, which I only did on my second playthrough. This is a dungeon added with a DLC, and is unlike anything else found in the base game. It has tighter encounter design and employs riddles and puzzles that the player must solve to progress. I spent an entire Sunday afternoon rummaging through the tower and fittingly finished it just as the sun was going down in real life. I don't really have many strong feelings on the story or setting of Baldur's Gate. I'm not all that familiar with the Forgotten Realms setting and haven't been in many tabletop situations. I do feel, however, that this game is a great middleman between someone like me, who knows of the setting but doesn't actively engage with it, and the setting itself. No matter your familiarity with the setting, if you're someone who thinks of themselves as a quote-unquote gamer, you will feel a vague homeliness to the kind of generic that is here on offer. Short swords, flails, quarterstaves, wolves, kobolds, and gnomes. You get the sense that you're not playing a knockoff here, but a lovingly crafted slice of the Forgotten Realms. You are a child of unknown origin, adopted by a man named Gorion and residing at the walled city of Candlekeep. One day, for an unknown to you reason, you are forced to leave Candlekeep and follow Gorion into the unknown. As you escape, you are stopped by a mysterious man monster who kills Gorion, with you just escaping with your life. Alone in the world, you must find two friends of Gorion and try to make sense of the happenings going on around you. The world is large and strange, but with the party power of friendship, things will become clear. The main quest itself isn't that pressing, giving the player a lot of room to explore without feeling like the world will end if they don't act. The stakes never get very high here. You are trying to find out the truth of your mysterious origin, which eventually tangles with the plot in Baldur's Gate that is already in motion. It'll be a while before you get any direct involvement with the goings-on with this plot, but the early game does a great job of foreshadowing a lot of the events to come. You will often hear about things long before they come into focus in the main quest. Not to spoil a 20-year-old or something game here, but the twist is that you are no normal child, but a devil child, a child of Baal, the Lord of Murder. This is a wonderfully interesting to me because I cannot think of another game where you start off from a weak level 1 and be promised to reach godhood status in the lore well before the game is over. You kill countless enemies in the game and it makes you stronger. No matter your alignment, murder is your sustenance and it must be done. While the story of Baldur's Gate takes a while to heat up and only really becomes interesting at the end, the promise, of which I'm told is kept, in Baldur's Gate 2 and the Throne of Baal are ones that I personally want to see for myself. The party members, they're all fine here. Nothing as detailed as later BioWare stuff, but all of them having enough personality to either be really annoying or lovable. My second playthrough consisted of Edwin, Jaheira, Archerman, Kagan, and Imoen. Hey, it's me, Imoen. This was a game that I was really going to give up on. I am very glad that I saw the light and came back to it after my moment of weakness with Final Fantasy XVI. An adventure so nice I partook in it twice. Before I had even decided to play the game, I would always Google, is Baldurs Gate 1 worth playing? And the answers always seem to almost always be, if you want. With this video, I wanted to, in a way, answer that question. Short answer is yes, it is worth it at least once. After beating it twice, it may be a while before I feel the need to beat it again. I already have 2 characters ready to transfer to Baldurs Gate 2. Leon S. Kennedy, the level 6 Ranger, and Tony Soprano, the level 8 Cleric. There is just something about how Baldurs Gate drags you through the mundanity of adventure that really highlights the feeling of progression in power. By the time I got to the end, I felt like my character was justified to demand power, that he should be feared, and that I as a player could make choices that challenged the powers that be. I recently tried a bit of the Baldurs Gate 3 beta, and while I had a ton of fun, I couldn't help but feel a little nauseous with how bombastic the intro was. I had just come off beating Baldurs Gate 1 twice, and the whiplash of the opening scene was severe. I'm not trying to knock BG3 though, merely to highlight how unique the humble beginnings in Baldurs Gate 1 are. I know a lot of people are excited for Baldurs Gate 3, so I hope I've convinced some of you to take the plunge and join me on this adventure through the older titles. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next video.